Why did the silence hurt more than the laughter? Elena Marquez stood beneath the cathedral's vaulted ceiling, her breath trembling inside the lace veil that suddenly felt too heavy for her shoulders. 1 moment ago, she was a bride. The next, a spectacle. The microphone still echoed from where it had hit the marble floor, its metallic ring fatting beneath the guests' uneasy laughter. "I can't marry a nobody like you," Richard had shouted, his words slicing through the air like shrapnel. And now the echo lingered sharp, final, cruel. Her bouquet shook in her hands. Petals slipped from between her fingers and scattered like fragile confetti across the aisle. She didn't move. She didn't chase them. Her dark hair, pinned simply, fell loose against her shoulders as if even it had surrendered to the weight pressing down on her chest. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Then the whispers began, a hiss, a rustle, a storm of judgment disguised as sympathy. She should have known better. Who invited her anyway? Poor thing, but really, what did she expect? Elena's face burned. Not from tears, she hadn't earned the right to cry yet, but from the sharp sting of humiliation that no training could have prepared her for. She looked up not at Richard, not at his mother smirking faintly from the front pew, but at the stained glass window above the altar. Light spilled through it, shards of red, blue, and gold dancing across her white gown. For a heartbeat, it painted her in beauty she couldn't feel. Her lips parted slightly. She wanted to say something, anything, but words felt useless in a room that had already decided what she was. Nobody. Unworthy. Uninvited to her own happiness. A murmur spread through the guests. Some pitied her. Some filmed her. Most just wanted to see how far she would fall before breaking. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet stems until the thorns bit her skin, but she didn't let go. Discipline, dignity, always stand straight. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her head, a ghost from a past she had buried too deep to speak of. She raised her chin just slightly and looked at Richard. He couldn't meet her eyes. The man she thought she knew, the one who once held her hand like it was the only truth that mattered, now stared at the floor, trembling, trapped between guilt and pride. His lips moved again, low, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Elena. I can't do this. My family." "My family," she whispered back, her voice steady despite the quake inside her chest. "That's what this was always about, wasn't it?" Richard didn't answer. A ripple of murmurs followed. Phones lifted again. Someone in the back whispered, "This will be all over social media by tonight." The laughter returned, polite, cruel, poisonous. And that's when she heard it. A faint vibration beneath the marble floor. At first, she thought it was her heart pounding too hard, but then came the rumble, deep, mechanical, growing. Engines. Outside the cathedral, tires screeched against stone. Heads turned, cameras swung toward the grand doors, the priest froze mid-blessing. Richard stepped back instinctively. The heavy wooden doors shuddered once, then burst open. Sunlight and dust flooded in. A fleet of black SUVs filled the church courtyard, their engines humming in perfect synchronization. Their doors opened in unison, like choreography. And then they marched in. 1,000 SEALs, not in ceremonial dress, but full tactical uniform, boots pounding against the marble floor, the sound echoing like thunder rolling through sacred walls. Gasps rippled through the guests, someone screamed, someone else dropped their phone. At the front of the formation, a man stepped forward, his posture sharp, his eyes unshaken. He didn't need to announce who he was. Command walked with him. "Captain Marquez," he said, his voice cutting clean through the panic, through the whispers, through everything. "It's time you reclaimed your honor." Elena blinked, her throat tight. "Captain." That word, it was more than a rank. It was a ghost calling her home. Her bouquet slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a sound that felt heavier than it should have. The entire church went still. The man, Commander Blake Rowe, approached slowly. His uniform bore the marks of age, of command, of respect that couldn't be bought with family names or political favors. He looked at her like he knew her, not as a fallen bride, but as something forgotten. "Elena Marquez," he said quietly, but his voice carried. "You've been hiding long enough." The murmurs rose again, more frantic now. "Captain, she was in the military. What is this, some kind of stunt?" Richard's mother stood abruptly. "Excuse me, this is a private ceremony. Who do you think you are?" Blake turned his gaze on her, calm, steady, unbothered. "Someone who knows what real honor looks like, ma'am. Something your family wouldn't recognize if it stared you in the eye." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She sat down. The seals lined the aisles now, each one standing like an unspoken truth, unyielding, silent, but loud in presence. Elena's eyes met Blake again. Her chest rose and fell, slow and controlled, like a soldier steadying before a mission. "Why now?" she asked softly, "after all these years?" "Because they took your name," he said. "They buried your record. They called your courage a failure to protect a senator's career. But today," his eyes flicked briefly to the crowd, "today the lies end." The guests shifted, their whispers sharp as knives. A photographer, eager, trembling, crept closer, his camera flashing. "Wait, Captain Marquez, the failed mission in Kandahar. That was you." Blake's jaw clenched. "Failed," he repeated, the word bitter. "Tell that to the 100 men she carried out of fire." The camera lowered. Richard stumbled backward, his face pale. "What is this?" he muttered. Some act. Elena, tell them the truth." Her voice came quiet, measured. "The truth. You wouldn't have believed it anyway." Her pulse thudded. She could feel every stare, every doubt, every judgment she had endured for years compressing into this single, impossible moment. The church that once held laughter now held silent, so dense it hummed. And in that silence, memories broke free, sharp flashes behind her eyes. The sandstorm. The burning metal. The voice in her comms screaming for backup that never came. The mission they called classified. The night she lost her team, and the version of herself she thought was real. She had left that world behind because she thought it left her first. But the past doesn't stay buried, not when the truth has claws. A young SEAL, barely older than she had been on her first mission, stepped forward from the line. His uniform was crisp, but his hands trembled slightly. "Ma'am," he said, voice cracking, "you saved my brother, Kandahar Ridge. He told me you carried him 2 miles under fire." Elena's eyes softened. She remembered that day, the chaos, the smell of blood and sand, the weight of a man twice her size across her shoulders. She remembered how silence followed her home, not celebration, not gratitude, just silence. She reached out and took the envelope he held. It was sealed with an official insignia. Her name, Captain E. Marquez, written across it. Her breath hitched. For the first time in years, she saw her name printed with honor. The guests watched in still disbelief. Some whispered, others simply stared. And somewhere in the back row, a senator in a tailored navy suit shifted uncomfortably, her sharp eyes calculating, her lips pressed into a cold smile. Victoria Kane, the woman who'd once signed the report that erased Elena's career. "Captain Marquez," she said finally, her voice smooth, commanding, and venomous. "Is this really how you want to be remembered? Interrupting a wedding, parading false valor to cover your shame?" The words rippled through the crowd like poison. Elena's shoulders straightened, her chin lifted. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked around at the faces that once mocked her, the guests who whispered, the man who had abandoned her mid-vow because she didn't fit into the family portrait. And then softly, "I didn't come here to prove anything. I came here to stop pretending." Her voice carried calm, raw, absolute. Outside, the sunlight shifted through the stained glass, painting her once more in gold and crimson. And as she stood there, the daughter of no one, the orphan mocked for her silence, the nobody left at the altar, something in the air changed. Fear became respect. Mockery became shame. Silence became power. Commander Blake took a slow step closer, his voice firm. "Captain, it's time." Her eyes flicked once toward Richard, whose lips trembled around the apology he couldn't find. She looked past him, past all of them. And when she finally spoke, her voice didn't belong to a broken bride. It belonged to the soldier they tried to erase. "I'm done letting others write my name for me." The air vibrated again, engines outside revving, rotors whirring above. And as the cathedral doors remained open to the sunlight and sound, one truth hung heavier than all the judgment in the room. This wasn't the end of her humiliation. It was the beginning of her reclamation. What if the truth you buried is the only thing that can save you? Elena hadn't planned to breathe those words again, Captain Marquez. The title used to weigh heavy on her chest, like armor she could no longer carry. Now, hearing it echo across the marble hall, it felt both foreign and familiar, a ghost's touch and a calling all at once. Commander Blake stood before her, steady, unyielding. The sun hit the silver on his collar, and for a fleeting second she saw the man she remembered, the one who had once led with compassion, not orders, the one who'd pulled her out of wreckage, half-conscious and bleeding, whispering, "Don't quit on me, Marquez." That was years ago, before the silence, before the lies. Now he was back, and behind him stood an army that didn't care for spectacle or politics. They weren't there to embarrass her groom. They were there for her. The guests didn't know that yet. Richard still stood near the altar, face pale, eyes darting from the soldiers to his exhale of disbelief. His suit looked too tight now, his posture small against the sheer magnitude of what had entered the room. "This is insane," he muttered, to no one in particular. "What kind of stunt?" "It's not a stunt," Blake said, his tone low, measured, dangerous. "It's justice." Senator Victoria Kane rose from her seat like a viper disturbed from rest. Her pearl earrings caught the light, perfect, poised, political. "Justice," she said, her voice dripping control. "Commander, you're trespassing. This woman's personal life has nothing to do with—" "Nothing to do with," Blake's voice cracked like thunder. "You buried her file. You called her a deserter when she saved more lives than your office ever will." A hush, then a ripple through the crowd, whispers, gasps, the flutter of disbelief. Kane smiled, thin and sharp. "You have no proof." Elena's hands trembled around the sealed envelope. Her own name stared back at her in bold, black ink. Captain E. Marquez. It didn't feel real. The letters looked like a memory she wasn't sure she deserved to reopen. Blake gestured toward the young seal who had handed it to her. "Open it," he said quietly. "They've heard their lies long enough." Her fingers brushed the paper. For a heartbeat, she froze. There was safety in silence. Silence didn't destroy reputations, but it didn't save them either. She tore the seal. Inside were documents, worn, official, and damning. A mission report stamped with classified Operation Echo Strike. Names she remembered. Coordinates she could still see in her dreams. The desert. The noise. The night they called her a coward for following her conscience. Her voice came slow, deliberate. 5 years ago, we were ordered to hold the ridge outside Kandahar. Intel was bad. The enemy wasn't supposed to be there. Her eyes flicked toward the senator, who stood still, calculating every breath. They were, in numbers we couldn't survive. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at the floor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same woman who'd been mocked for being a nobody now held the entire room hostage with truth. She continued, quieter now. "I called for extraction. The command denied it. They said hold position until confirmation from the senator's office." Her eyes didn't move. "We waited 4 hours, lost 19 soldiers. One of them was 19 himself." A silence so complete followed that even the church's old pipes seemed to stop humming. "I disobeyed," Elena said. "I went against the order. I led them out." She inhaled, eyes wet but unbroken. "Every man I carried, every woman I dragged through that fire, they told me I was wrong, that saving them was insubordination." The room seemed to tilt under the weight of the revelation. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another said, "They punished her for saving them." Elena lowered the papers, her voice softened, reflective. "The report was rewritten, my name erased. They called it a failed extraction, not a rescue. Said I broke command, disobeyed orders. They needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. A captain with no family, no legacy, no voice." Kane's jaw clenched. "Conspiracy theories," she hissed, but her voice faltered. "That report was buried for national security reasons." Blake stepped forward. "National security didn't fill your campaign fund, Senator. That lie did." The crowd stirred, cameras rose, a few flashes went off. Even the guests who had mocked Elena at the pre-wedding party, the women in silk, the men in smug suits, were silent now. Shame looked good on them, she thought distantly, in a way sadness never had. Richard's mother, Margaret, stood suddenly, her voice shrill. "This is a wedding, a personal matter. You can't just barge in with soldiers and accusations." Blake didn't even turn to face her. "Ma'am, the United States Navy has been trying to give this woman her name back for 5 years. If you think your son's embarrassment compares to that, you're welcome to leave." Her mouth opened, then closed. She sat fast. Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. Elena felt the weight of the church on her shoulders, judgment turning to confusion, confusion turning to guilt. Every breath was heavy with what wasn't said. Every eye waited for her next word. But she didn't speak right away. Instead, her gaze drifted to the stained glass window again. The sunlight had shifted. It poured directly over her now, warm and unyielding. For the first time since the ceremony began, she didn't feel small beneath it. Her mind drifted back to the night before. The man who'd come to her apartment, the envelope, the low hum of an SUV waiting outside. He hadn't said who sent him, only that she'd need the truth tomorrow. She understood now that tomorrow was this. She looked back at Blake. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "They'll make you pay for this." Blake gave a small, tired smile. "They already did. I've got nothing left to lose except my word." Something in her chest cracked open, not pain, not relief, something between the two. Gratitude with scars. Senator Kane moved to speak again, but Blake cut her off with a single hand. He turned to the SEALs lined in formation and gave a short, sharp nod. They stepped forward, boots echoing. From one of the SUVs, an agent brought in a worn metal case. He opened it on the altar. Inside, velvet and steel gleamed under the church light. A medal, a single folded flag, and a file, the original mission report, stamped with her signature. Blake lifted the medal, the ribbon trembling slightly in his hand. "This belonged to Captain Marquez," he said. 5 years ago, she earned the Navy Cross for valor under fire. It was revoked under false testimony. That testimony came from the senator's office." Kane froze, her face lost color. "That's classified." "Not anymore," Blake said. "We unsealed it this morning." The crowd erupted in whispers, some gasps, others outrage. Richard looked around helplessly, sweat gathering at his temples. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice breaking, "why didn't you ever tell me?" She turned to him. The question was small, almost pathetic against the noise. "Because you never asked," she said simply. "You saw what everyone else saw, what they told you to see, a girl with no name." The words hit him harder than any bullet could. His shoulders slumped. His lips parted, but nothing came out. A woman in the crowd, someone Elena didn't recognize, stood up. "Is this all true?" she asked, trembling. She saved them." Blake's gaze softened. 102 soldiers returned home because of her, because she refused to obey an immoral order. You're all here, alive, free, because of people like her who get forgotten. The woman sat, tears streaking her cheeks. And then silence again. It was a strange silence, not hostile anymore, but reverent, uneasy, like the moment before confession. Elena looked at the medal resting in Blake's hands. Her own reflection shimmered in the polished metal, eyes tired, yet unbroken. The past looked back at her, waiting. "You could have mailed it," she whispered. "Wouldn't have meant the same," Blake replied. "They needed to see what dignity looks like." She inhaled shakily, closing her hand around the metal. The cold weight against her skin felt like the truth itself, heavy, real, earned. Kane's mask of composure cracked. "You'll regret this," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You think this circus absolves you, you think." Elena's gaze met hers, calm, final. "I don't need absolution," she said, "just the truth." The senator faltered, and for the first time since she entered politics, Victoria Kane had no words. Blake turned to the guests. "You judged her because she stood alone. But let me tell you something about soldiers. The ones worth remembering never fight for applause." No one moved. The truth had settled like dust, impossible to ignore, impossible to clean away. And then faintly from outside, the deep synchronized sound of engines revved again. The sunlight flickered across the stained glass, painting everyone in red and gold like the battlefield she once escaped, reborn in color. Elena looked toward the open doors, the SUVs waiting like sentinels beyond the steps. The air shifted. She exhaled, a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for years. The crowd didn't know what to do, applaud, apologize. They just watched her, all of them. The woman who stood where shame was supposed to live, now taller than the lie that tried to bury her. Her heart beat once, steady and sure. She turned to Blake. "What happens now?" He smiled faintly. "You tell your story, the rest will follow." For a moment she closed her eyes. The memories flickered again, the desert, the screams, the heat, the faces she carried. But this time they didn't break her. They stood behind her. She opened her eyes. The church that had felt like a tomb now felt like a beginning. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Blake nodded, stepped aside and motioned toward the doors. The seal snapped to attention, saluting as she passed. As Elena walked down the aisle, her veil trailing behind like smoke fading into light, her own footsteps echoed where laughter once did. Not as a bride left behind, but as a soldier stepping forward. And just before she crossed the threshold, she stopped, turned once, her eyes sweeping the crowd that had mocked her, doubted her, dismissed her. Her voice was soft, almost tender, but it carried through every corner of the hall. "Sometimes," she said, "it's not courage they hate, it's the mirror it holds up to their cowardice." She didn't wait for the reaction. The world could catch up later. Outside, the sunlight hit her full in the face. The engines hummed. The air felt alive again. The past had finally stopped chasing her. And the woman they called nobody had just walked back into her name. What happens when the truth finally sees daylight, but the world still wants a prettier lie? The sunlight hit Elena's face like a spotlight as she stepped down the church steps, her heels clicking softly against the stone. The roar of engines faded into a low hum behind her. For a moment, the air stood still, heavy with something that wasn't judgment anymore, but awe, or maybe fear. The crowd outside didn't move. Reporters froze in mid-breath, cameras trembling in their hands. Someone's phone streamed live, the lens trembling, voice whispering, "Is this real? Are those actual Navy SEALs?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any denial could ever be. Blake followed a step behind her, his expression unreadable. Around them, a formation of SEALs held position, forming a human corridor, not for protection, but respect. The kind of silent honor the world never sees until it's forced to look. A breeze tugged at her veil, lifting it briefly before setting it down again. It was strange, she had worn that dress to be someone's bride, but now every thread of it felt like armor. White, yes, but no longer pure in the way the world defined it. It was strength and it was survival. Blake's voice came low, barely audible under the murmur of the gathering press. "You sure you want to face this? They're already spinning the story." Elena turned to him, her eyes steady. They were always going to spin it. Might as well give them something true. He gave a small nod, half proud, half sad. "That's the Marquez I remember." The cameras flashed again, too close now, pushing through the line of soldiers. Questions fired like bullets. "Captain Marquez, did the senator really falsify your report? Were you dishonorably discharged? Is this some kind of political stunt? Are you really who you say you are?" Elena stopped mid-step. Her shadow stretched long against the marble, cutting between them. She looked at the crowd, the microphones thrust forward like weapons. Her voice came low but clear. "You all believed the story they told because it was easier to hate the woman who stayed silent than question the one who spoke loudest." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the sea of cameras. "Now you can decide if the truth still matters." That silence that followed wasn't respectful, it was uncertain. The kind of silence people fill later with commentary and debate. Blake stepped forward, raising a hand toward the media. "Back off, give her space." But Elena shook her head slightly. "No, let them film, let them see everything they missed." For a moment her eyes found the camera lens nearest to her, a single glass eye that blinked red and alive. She stared into it like she was looking through it, right into the people who would watch this later on screens in their hands. "You've been lied to," she said softly. "And so was I." Then she walked on. The SEALs closed ranks again, escorting her toward the lead SUV. The engines revved in perfect rhythm. As she reached the door, she turned one last time toward the cathedral, the laughter, the mockery, the faces pressed against glass trying to record history. Richard stood in the doorway, pale, his mother clutching his arm like a lifeline. He looked smaller now, fragile. His lips moved like he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Elena held his gaze for half a second, not with anger, not with pity, but with something far heavier, finality. She gave him a nod, nothing more, a gesture of closure, and then she got in the SUV. The door shut behind her, muffling the chaos outside. The hum of the engine was almost comforting, steady, mechanical, alive. For a long minute no one spoke. The world outside flashed in fragments through the tinted glass, reporters chasing, cameras flashing, a helicopter circling overhead. Finally Blake broke the silence. "You know they'll come for you now," he said quietly. "Kane won't go down without dragging someone with her." Elena's fingers brushed the metal in her lap. "She already did," she said. "She just didn't bury me deep enough." Blake gave a short laugh. "That's one way to put it." She turned her face toward the window, watching the city blur past. "What happens now?" "You'll have to testify. The Office of Naval Intelligence reopened the case this morning. Someone leaked the files." Elena's brow furrowed. "Leaked who?" Blake didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered out the windshield, a flicker of tension crossing his jaw. "Someone who wanted this day to happen," he said finally. "Someone who still believes in what you stood for." Her chest tightened. "Then they're in danger." "Maybe," Blake said, almost to himself. "But some things are worth the risk." They drove in silence for several minutes. The city rolled by, too bright, too loud, too alive for what she felt inside. Every block, every intersection reminded her how long she'd been living in the shadows, how much of her life had been built on quiet survival, not living. She spent 5 years pretending to be small, pretending the world forgot her didn't hurt. But now, seeing the truth unravel in front of cameras, she realized she had never been invisible. She'd just been buried. Her thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of Blake's phone. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned it toward her. It was a live broadcast, news anchors already dissecting the morning's chaos. On the screen, headlines scrolled across the bottom. Disgraced bride or forgotten hero. Former Navy captain crashes own wedding with SEAL unit. Senator Victoria Kane denies wrongdoing. Conspiracy or cover-up. The images switched footage of Elena standing before the altar, Blake saluting, the crowd stunned faces. Her expression frozen mid-breath, broadcast to millions. Elena stared, her stomach tightening. "They'll twist it," she said softly. "They'll make me look unhinged." Blake gave a small nod. "They'll try, but some lies collapse under their own weight." He turned off the screen and leaned back. "You're not alone in this anymore, Marquez. We've got the files. We've got the witnesses. You just have to stay visible. They can't erase you again if everyone's watching." Her mind drifted. Visible. That used to mean exposure, weakness. But now, maybe it meant survival. The SUV slowed to a stop outside a quiet government building, nondescript, gray, surrounded by unmarked cars. Blake gestured to it. "You'll be safe here. For now." Elena stepped out. The air was colder here, sharper. The kind of sterile quiet that usually came before classified briefings. She looked up at the flag rippling above the entrance. It didn't feel like home, but it didn't feel foreign either. Blake followed beside her, speaking low. The senator's already spinning her version, claiming the SEALs staged the event for political revenge. Elena gave a faint, tired smile. "Let her talk. The truth has legs, but lies need crutches." Inside, the hall smelled of old paper and coffee. A woman in a gray suit led them to a small conference room. On the table were stacks of documents, digital files, sealed evidence bags. Everything that had been taken from her, now laid out like pieces of her identity returned. Elena ran her fingers over a stack of photos, her old unit, smiling through dirt and fatigue. A young soldier flashing a peace sign behind her. Another holding a half-broken guitar in the middle of the desert. Faces she hadn't seen in years. Blake watched her quietly. "We found them all, those who made it back. They're ready to testify." Her throat tightened. "All of them." He hesitated. "Almost all." The weight of those two words hit her like a recoil. "Who's missing?" Blake met her eyes. "Daniel." The name hit harder than any headline could. For a moment her mind blanked. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Daniel's gone. I saw his name on the casualty list." "Officially, yes," Blake said. "But there were rumors, off-the-record chatter that he survived. Went dark during a follow-up op. No confirmation, but—" Her heart stuttered. "But what?" "But someone who looked like him was seen near a classified drop site 2 months ago. He didn't report in. The brass buried it." She sat slowly, her pulse racing in her ears. Daniel, her fiancé before the war, her comrade in the field, the man whose name she whispered into the sand when everything fell apart. If he was alive. Blake's phone buzzed again, cutting through the thought. He checked the message, his expression shifting from alert to alarm. "We've got company." Outside, faint at first, came the sound, not of engines this time, but blades. Helicopter rotors, distant but closing fast. Elena stood instantly. "Press." "Too coordinated," Blake said, moving to the window. "That's not media." The sound grew louder, rumbling over the building, shaking the windows. A security officer burst in. "Sir, 2 helos just touched down on the west pad. No clearance codes." Blake swore under his breath. "She's moving fast." "Kane?" Elena asked. "Or someone cleaning up for her?" He turned to her, eyes sharp. "You need to get to sublevel 2. There's an extraction tunnel. Go now." But Elena didn't move. She looked at the evidence spread across the table, years of silence, lies, erased names. "If I run again," she said quietly, "they win." "Damn it, Marquez." "No," she said firmly, eyes locked on his. "I'm done hiding. If they want to come for me, they'll have to do it in the open." Blake stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled, the same kind of smile soldiers give before a fight they know is inevitable. Then let's make it count. He reached for his calm, barking orders as the sound of boots echoed down the hall. The building came alive, motion, shouts, the thud of reinforced doors locking into place. And Elena stood in the middle of it all, the metal cold in her hand, her pulse steady. The noise outside grew louder, chaos moving closer, the sky vibrating with danger. And through it all she thought of one thing, a voice from the past, laughing softly under a desert sky, saying, "You can't kill what refuses to die." Daniel's voice. She didn't know if it was memory or warning, but she looked toward the window, and in the distance, beyond the glare of sunlight and the blur of spinning blades, she swore she saw a figure standing at the edge of the landing pad. A man. Worn, scarred. Unmistakable. Her breath caught. He wasn't supposed to be alive. Was it really him, or just the ghost she'd carried through every sleepless night since the war? Elena froze by the window. The sunlight reflected off the glass, blinding her for a moment, but not enough to erase the shape she saw beyond the landing pad. A man standing firm against the storm of wind kicked up by the rotors. His silhouette was carved in defiance, shoulders square, head high. Daniel. Her pulse faltered. For a heartbeat, the noise around her, the shouting soldiers, the warning sirens, Blake's orders, all faded. It was just the sound of her own breath, ragged and disbelieving. He was alive. Blake's voice cut through the haze. "Marquez, get away from the window." She didn't move, couldn't. The doors at the end of the corridor burst open. Armed guards rushed in, faces taut. "Sir, West helipad secured. 2 choppers. No response on comms. One passenger claims to have clearance under Operation Echo." Blake froze. "Echo?" He turned sharply toward Elena. "That was your call sign." Her chest tightened. "Then he's not here to kill me," she said quietly. Blake's eyes narrowed. "Or he's here to finish what they started." The guards tensed. Outside the rotors slowed, the air heavy with grit and tension. Elena moved before anyone could stop her. She walked past the guards, her steps steady despite the tremor in her legs. Blake called her name once, low, warning, but she didn't turn back. The doors opened onto the helipad. The wind was fierce, carrying the smell of jet fuel and metal. Her veil whipped against her face, the white fabric now gray with dust. Daniel stood near the edge, the helicopters looming behind him like watchful beasts. His uniform wasn't standard tactical gear stripped of insignia. His beard was rough, his face older, lined by time and silence. But it was him. There was no mistaking the scar that ran along his left temple, the one she'd kissed once, the night before the mission that took everything from them. For a second, neither spoke. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then he smiled, faint, careful, almost broken. "You always were terrible at following orders." Her throat tightened. "You're supposed to be dead." He took a slow step forward, his boots loud against the metal. "Supposed to be," he said, "but death's overrated." She didn't move. The distance between them was barely 20 feet, but it felt like a lifetime. Her voice was steady when she finally found it. "Where the hell have you been?" Daniel exhaled, his eyes softening. "Off the grid." After the mission fell apart, Command ordered a silent sweep. "They didn't just erase you, Elena. They erased me too, said I was KIA, gave my mother a folded flag and told her to move on." The words hit her like wind to an open wound. "And you didn't reach out." "I tried," he said. "But when I saw what they did to you, how they made you the villain, I realized coming back too soon would bury you deeper. They'd call it collusion, conspiracy. I had to wait." She shook her head. "Wait for what? For me to become a punchline? For my life to fall apart?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "For the truth to surface. And it did today because you made them look, you made them remember." Behind them, the security team watched cautiously, hands hovering over triggers. Blake stood in the doorway, silent, eyes sharp. Elena's breath trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. "So this is you coming back. After 5 years of silence, you just show up out of the sky like a ghost I'm supposed to forgive." Daniel's voice lowered. "I didn't come for forgiveness. I came to finish what we started." The words hung there, heavy, dangerous. "What do you mean?" she asked. He glanced toward the helicopters. Kane wasn't just protecting her career. She was protecting something bigger. That ambush in Kandahar, it wasn't a mistake. It was a diversion. She sold coordinates to a private defense contractor. Your unit was the price. Elena's blood ran cold. "That's not possible." "I wish it wasn't," Daniel said, "but I've got proof, and I've been holding onto it for 5 years. He pulled a small encrypted drive from his vest pocket, black, scuffed, and unmarked. "Everything's here. The payment logs, communication records, clearance transfers. It all leads back to her." Elena stepped forward, eyes locked on the drive. "Why bring it to me?" "Because no one else would believe me," he said simply. "But they'll believe you now." Her breath caught. For the first time, the weight of what this day truly meant began to settle on her. This wasn't just redemption, it was exposure. The kind that burns everything in its path. Behind her, Blake stepped forward, his voice cutting through the roar of the rotors. "We can't handle this here. We need to move her. Now." But before he could finish, a gunshot cracked through the air. The sound was sharp, cruel, final. Elena dropped instinctively, years of muscle memory taking over. The guards scrambled for cover. Blake shouted orders. Another shot rang out, this one closer, ricocheting off the metal railing near Daniel's head. He spun, drawing his sidearm in one swift motion. "Sniper!" Blake ducked behind a barricade. "We've got hostiles on the east roof." Elena crawled to cover, her breath fast, adrenaline flooding every nerve. How the hell did they find us this fast? Daniel fired 2 quick shots toward the rooftop. "Because they never lost us." Through the chaos, she caught a glimpse of the sniper, dark suit, glint of glass, clean precision. Corporate, not military. A hired gun. Blake barked into his comm, calling for extraction. The SEALs below were already mobilizing, engines roaring. Daniel moved toward her, crouching low. "We have to move." But she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on something else. The small black drive that had slipped from Daniel's vest and now lay inches from the edge of the helipad, one strong gust away from being gone forever. She lunged forward. "Elena, don't." Too late. She reached the edge, her fingers closing around the drive just as another shot cracked through the air. Metal sparks flared inches from her hand. She ducked, clutching the drive to her chest, heart pounding. Daniel grabbed her wrist, pulling her back behind the barricade. "You haven't changed," he muttered. "Neither have you," she said, her breath shaking. "Still showing up late." Despite the chaos, he smiled. The same quiet, infuriating smile that used to drive her mad. Blake reappeared beside them, shouting over the wind. "Birds inbound. We've got 30 seconds." Elena looked toward the sky. 2 black helicopters circled overhead, ropes dropping. SEALs rappelled down, their precision flawless. The gunfire subsided as the snipers realized they were outnumbered. Daniel holstered his weapon, grabbed Elena's arm, and pulled her toward the chopper. "Time to go, Captain." The title hit differently this time, not as a memory but a rebirth. As the helicopter lifted off, the city shrank below them, streets filled with flashing lights, reporters scrambling, sirens wailing. Elena watched it all disappear beneath the haze. Her pulse slowed, but her mind didn't. The drive in her hand felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried in war. It wasn't just evidence, it was accountability. The kind people in power would kill to bury. Daniel sat across from her, silent, eyes scanning the skyline. Blake sat beside the pilot, barking coordinates into his comm. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "So what's on this thing that's worth killing for?" Daniel looked up. Names, transactions, and something else, something personal. She frowned. Personal. He hesitated, then reached into his vest again. I found this in the same folder, he said, pulling out a small, worn photograph. Her breath caught. It was the two of them standing side by side in their uniforms, arms around each other, smiles tired but genuine. Written across the back in faded ink were 5 words: "If they erase us, remember." Her vision blurred. For the first time since she'd stepped into that church, her composure cracked. She looked at him, eyes shining. "You kept it." "I kept everything," he said softly, "because I knew someday the truth would need a witness." She closed her eyes, leaning back against the metal frame of the chopper. The noise of the rotors faded into a dull hum. For the first time in 5 years, she felt something close to peace, fragile, fleeting, but real. Blake turned in his seat. "We're heading to the safe site in Quantico. Once we land, we'll hand everything to the JAG office. After that—" His voice cut off as static filled his earpiece. The pilot frowned. "We're losing comms." The helicopter jolted suddenly, a hard, unexpected drop. Warning lights flashed red. "Talk to me," Blake barked. The pilot's voice strained. "Something's interfering with navigation, external signal. We're being jammed." Daniel moved to the cockpit. "We're not alone out here." Outside the window, the horizon shimmered, and then another black helicopter emerged from the clouds. No insignia, moving fast. Elena's heart sank. "They're not done." Blake's jaw tightened. "Then neither are we." "What do you do when the sky itself turns against you?" The cockpit alarms blared like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Red lights flashed across the cabin, painting everyone in pulses of emergency. The helicopter jolted hard to the left, sending Elena gripping the metal seat edge to steady herself. The world outside spun: blue sky, gray smoke, sun glare, repeat. "Talk to me," Blake shouted over the roar of the engines. The pilot fought with the controls. "They're jamming us," manual override sluggish. Daniel leaned forward, eyes locked on the enemy craft cutting through the clouds, sleek, black and silent, marked with nothing. Private sector, probably. Expensive. Deadly. "They're closing fast," he muttered. 2 o'clock high. Elena squinted through the glass. The helicopter tailing them wasn't military. It was corporate precision, smooth, angular, mercenary. She could see the gun turret mounted under the nose, swiveling like a predator ready to strike. "They're not here to scare us," Daniel said. "They're here to erase us." Blake snapped his harness tight. "Then let's make it expensive." The pilot jerked the stick. The aircraft dropped hard, stomachs lifting with the fall. Elena braced herself as wind screamed through the cabin seams. Loose gear rattled. The sound of gunfire cracked through the open sky, tracer rounds slicing past the window like lightning. Elena ducked. "They're firing on us." Blake shouted toward the cockpit. "Can we lose altitude?" "Not for long," the pilot yelled. "We'll hit the tree line in 40 seconds." The first bullet struck their right side, punching a hole clean through the fuselage. Air whistled through, and a piece of shrapnel tore across Elena's shoulder. She hissed, clutching it instinctively. Warm blood slicked her palm. Daniel reached over, pressing his hand against her wound. "You're hit." "Just a scratch," she lied. Her voice was tight but steady. He tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it quickly around her shoulder, his fingers working with the precision of someone who'd done it too many times before. "You always said that," he murmured, "even when it was." "Some habits keep us alive," she said. The second burst hit the tail rotor. The chopper lurched violently. Warning lights flared red. Blake grabbed the comm. "Mayday, this is Fox 2-1. We've taken damage. Request immediate ground support." "Static, only static." "Comms are fried," the pilot shouted. Daniel's gaze stayed fixed on the approaching helicopter. It was almost close enough now that Elena could see the man inside the gunner seat, helmeted, faceless, efficient. He turned to Blake. "We can't outrun them. We've got to outthink them." Blake's jaw clenched. "You got a plan?" Yeah, Daniel said grimly, but you're not going to like it. He moved to the side hatch, pulling it open with a screech of metal. Wind blasted into the cabin, tearing through the air like knives. Elena grabbed the railing. What are you doing? Daniel looked at her, eyes calm, too calm. You trust me. She hesitated. The world spun behind him, sky and earth colliding. You're insane. Probably, he said, a faint smile ghosting across his face. But you always said I was a better shot in motion. Before she could stop him, he swung out of the hatch, one foot braced against the metal frame, the other dangling in open sky. The wind ripped at him, but he held steady, rifle braced against his shoulder. Blake yelled over the roar, "You'll never make that shot in this wind." Daniel's voice came low, even, "Watch me." The enemy helicopter pulled closer, 50 meters, maybe less. The gunner aimed again, barrel glowing red. Daniel took a breath, steadying his sight. The wind whipped his hair, the horizon tilted, and in the chaos he fired. One shot, clean, controlled. The bullet cut through open air and tore straight into the gunner's visor. The man collapsed backward, limp. The enemy chopper veered violently, spiraling for a moment before regaining control. Elena stared, adrenaline and disbelief crashing in waves. You haven't lost your aim. Daniel grinned, pulling himself back inside. Wasn't planning to. The victory lasted seconds. Then came the sound, a high-pitched whine, mechanical and growing. Lock on signal, the pilot shouted. They've got missiles. Blake barked, flares now. The pilot slammed a switch. Bright bursts of countermeasure fire streamed from the chopper's sides, glowing trails against the sun. One missile followed a flare off course, exploding mid-air, but the second held steady. Elena saw it coming, fast, precise. Brace, Blake yelled. Impact. The world exploded. The right side of the aircraft blew apart. Metal screamed. Heat washed through the cabin. The explosion threw Elena against the wall, her body weightless, tumbling. The sound was deafening, fire, wind, metal. Everything went black for a moment. When she came to, the world was sideways. The helicopter was spiraling, tail spinning, alarms screaming, smoke filling the air. Daniel, she shouted, coughing. He was slumped across from her, dazed, blood at his temple. Blake was yelling into the dead comms. The pilot was gone, his seat empty, canopy shattered. The ground rushed up toward them, a blur of trees and rock and sun. Elena grabbed the overhead harness and crawled toward Daniel. We have to jump. Blake spun toward her. We're too low for parachutes. Then we crash soft, she yelled. Daniel blinked, awake, groggy but conscious. You're still giving orders, huh? Someone has to, she said. He groaned, pushing himself upright. You've always been terrible at soft landings. The chopper slammed through the first line of trees, branches cracking like gunfire. The cabin shook violently. Sparks rained down as the blades sheared off. Blake shielded his head, shouting something she couldn't hear. Then darkness again. When she woke this time, it was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled of smoke and pine. Sunlight flickered through broken branches. Somewhere nearby, metal groaned and hissed as it cooled. Elena blinked, wincing, her body ached. Blood matted her hair, her arms screamed with pain. She tried to move. One leg responded, the other didn't. Daniel, she rasped. A groan answered her from somewhere behind the wreckage. Still here. Relief washed over her, sharp and aching. She turned her head. Blake was nearby, pulling himself from a heap of twisted metal, coughing through smoke. Everyone alive. Define alive, Daniel muttered, dragging himself upright. His shirt was torn, his side bleeding, but his eyes were alert. Elena coughed, spitting dirt. Where are we? Blake scanned the tree line. Judging by the terrain, Appalachians, maybe 30 miles south of Quantico. They'll sweep the area fast. Elena pushed herself upright, ignoring the pain. We have to move before they find us. Daniel shook his head. We can't leave the wreck, that drive. She held it up, the black device glinting faintly in the light. Got it. He smiled weakly. You never miss. She looked at him, her voice soft but cutting. Don't make me regret saving you twice in one day. Blake stumbled toward them, wiping blood from his forehead. I've sent a distress ping from my emergency transponder, but if they're jamming us, it might not go through. Daniel leaned against a broken beam. They won't stop. That data's the key. They'll keep coming until it's gone or we are. Elena turned the drive over in her hands. It felt heavier now, not just evidence, but the weight of every soldier's silence, every life buried under paperwork and politics. She met Daniel's eyes. Then we don't run, she said. We finish it. Blake frowned. You mean? She nodded. We leak it, all of it. If the world sees the truth, they can't kill it. Daniel studied her, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes that no humiliation, no betrayal, no crash could dim. You're sure? He asked quietly. Elena nodded once. They took my name, my rank, my life. I'm not giving them my silence. Blake hesitated, then smiled, slow, approving. That's the Captain Marquez I remember. But before any of them could move, a branch snapped in the distance. All three froze. Elena raised her head, listening. The forest was still, too still. Then another sound, the soft crunch of boots on soil. Daniel's hand moved to his weapon. Blake crouched low, motioning for silence. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. They found us. A figure emerged through the haze, tactical gear, black visor, rifle at the ready. Then another, and another. At least 6, maybe more. Private contractors, Kane's cleanup team. Blake mouthed, 3 o'clock flank. Daniel nodded, signaling silently. He looked at Elena. You remember the drill. Her lips curved faintly. You still think I forget anything. The first man stepped closer, rifle sweeping side to side. Blake counted down under his breath. 3, 2. Before he could say one, Elena moved fast, precise. She lunged low, grabbed the man's rifle barrel, twisted it down, and drove her knee into his chest. The breath left him in a grunt as she yanked his weapon free. Daniel fired twice, dropping 2 more before they hit the dirt. Blake tackled another from behind, slamming him into the wreckage. The sound of gunfire tore through the forest, echoes bouncing off the trees. Within seconds it was over, silence again. Elena stood over the fallen men, breathing hard, smoke curling from the rifle barrel. Her dress, what was left of it, was torn, streaked with blood and soot, but her eyes burned clear. Daniel looked at her, shaking his head. You were never the one who needed saving. She didn't smile. Then don't slow me down. Blake kicked one of the contractor's radios. We've got maybe 15 minutes before reinforcements arrive. We move now. Elena tucked the drive into her vest, secured the strap. We head east. There's a comm tower 20 miles out. If it's still operational, we can transmit the files before they find us. Daniel grabbed a backpack, slinging it over his shoulder. Then let's start walking. They moved into the trees, 3 silhouettes against the smoke, vanishing into the wild. Behind them, the wreck smoldered quietly, flames reflecting off the broken wings like the remnants of a fallen promise. And somewhere far above, in an office lined with glass and power, Senator Victoria Kane watched a live satellite feed of the wreckage. Her expression didn't change. Track them, she said coldly, and when you find them, finish it. How long can you run before the truth stops being a burden and becomes a weapon? The forest was thick with mist, each breath cold enough to bite. Elena led the way, her footsteps deliberate, her eyes scanning every shadow. The morning light filtered weakly through the branches, painting streaks of gold on the damp ground. Behind her, Daniel walked silent but alert, his rifle low and ready. Blake trailed a few paces behind, limping slightly, one hand pressed to his side. His blood had soaked through his shirt, but he didn't complain. They had been walking for hours. The wreck smoke had faded behind them, but the echo of engines, faint, distant, still haunted the air. Elena stopped briefly, crouching near a stream that cut through the trees. She dipped her fingers into the icy water, then brought them to her lips. "We're not far," she murmured. Daniel knelt beside her. "How do you know?" She pointed east, toward the ridge barely visible through the fog. "Elevation shift. If the maps are right, the calm tower should be on the other side. Maybe 2 hours." Blake grunted, "Assuming we don't get tracked before then." Elena looked at him, steady, calculating. "You can still move." He smirked faintly. "If you can walk in that dress, Captain, I can manage a flesh wound." She almost smiled. "Almost. Good, then stay sharp. They'll use drones before boots." He nodded, "Already scanning frequencies. If they're pinging, I'll hear it." Daniel crouched lower, scooping a handful of water and tossing it over his face. "You remember the first time we went dark in the field?" Elena's lips pressed into a line. "Afghanistan, 2 days behind the line. You wouldn't stop talking about coffee." He chuckled softly, "Still wouldn't mind some." The quiet that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that only exists between people who have seen each other at their worst. The kind forged under fire, tempered in silence. Blake's earpiece crackled suddenly, faint interference. He froze. "Hold." Elena tensed. "What is it?" He adjusted the dial, his expression tightening. "Radio bleed. Encrypted chatter, not ours." Daniel raised his rifle, eyes sweeping the tree line. "Direction." "Southwest," Blake whispered. "They're sweeping in formation, probably 30 men." Elena scanned the canopy above. "If they've got thermal drones, the foliage will only mask us so long." Blake nodded grimly. "Then we move fast, stay under cover." They moved low, silent like ghosts through the trees. Every sound mattered. Every breath felt measured. Somewhere in the distance, the faint whir of a drone pulsed like a heartbeat. Elena signaled for them to stop. She pulled a small mirror from her belt, one of the few field tricks she never forgot, and angled it upward. Through the reflection, the sky flashed with a metallic glint. "There," she whispered. "Recon drone, low orbit, they're close." Daniel glanced at her. "Ideas?" She thought for a moment, then looked at Blake. "You still carry EMP charges." Blake frowned. "Two, but the radius will fry everything, including that drive you're carrying." Elena shook her head. "We can't risk it. We use decoy heat." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Meaning?" Elena pulled the detonator from Blake's pack, then ripped off a piece of her torn dress. The satin white streaked with blood and dirt. She tied it around the device, flicked the power, and tossed it deeper into the forest. 5 seconds, she said quietly. The faint hum built a pulse, then another. High above, the drone shifted course, sensors locking onto the heat bloom. Within moments, it dove toward the false signal. "Move," she said, and they did. They ran, weaving between trees, ducking under branches, the forest blurring past. Every muscle screamed, every heartbeat thundered, but none of them stopped. Behind them, the explosion was small, just enough to sound like movement. The forest echoed with distant gunfire. "They took the bait," Blake said, breathing hard. Elena didn't slow down. "Good, that buys us maybe 10 minutes." By the time they reached the ridge, the sun had begun to break through the fog. From there, the view stretched endless, valleys, trees, and, far in the distance, the faint silhouette of a tower against the light. "There," she said, pointing. Daniel shielded his eyes. "You sure that's it?" "I never forget coordinates." Blake studied the terrain. 3 clicks, open ground. If they spot us there, we're done. Elena's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Then we make it count." They descended carefully, every step deliberate. The silence between them grew heavier, not fear, but focus. They were soldiers again, stripped of rank and reputation, but still bound by something deeper, unfinished duty. At the base of the valley, the wind shifted. The air smelled faintly of smoke, recent. Daniel tensed. They've been through here. Elena crouched, brushing her fingers over the ground. The soil was disturbed, the imprint of boots deep, uniform. 3 squads, she murmured. 10 per pattern sweep. They're boxing us in. Blake cursed softly. They're good. Daniel's hand brushed hers, steadying. So are we. They moved again, faster now. The trees thinned, the shadows shortening as they neared the clearing. The tower loomed ahead, tall, skeletal, surrounded by rusted fences and overgrown brush. Blake exhaled. There it is. But something about it felt wrong. Too quiet, too easy. Elena felt it before she saw it, that old soldier's instinct, the silent alarm deep in the gut. She raised a hand. Stop. Daniel froze mid-step. What is it? Blake asked. She scanned the ground, eyes narrowing. Then she saw it, a thin wire stretched across the dirt, almost invisible. Her stomach tightened. Trip mines, she whispered. They've been here. Blake's jaw tensed. They knew where we were heading. Daniel crouched, eyes flicking to the device. Kane's men must have traced the drone feed. Which means they're waiting, Elena said. Her mind raced, angles, exits, probabilities. Every scenario ended the same, surrounded. Then through the static of Blake's damaged earpiece, a faint voice broke through, female, cold, composed. Elena Marquez, the voice said, you've come a long way to die tired. Elena froze. Kane. Blake ripped out the earpiece, but the signal still carried faintly, bleeding through another channel nearby, amplified. They're broadcasting, Daniel said, scanning the perimeter. The voice continued, smooth and mocking. You should have stayed, forgotten, Captain. You had your chance at peace, but you had to be a hero again. Elena's hand tightened around her rifle. You talk too much for someone who hides behind other people's guns. Kane laughed, soft, dismissive. You think this is about you. You were a pawn in a game you never understood. I didn't bury your name. I used it. The moment you disobeyed, you gave me exactly what I needed, a scapegoat to build an empire on. Daniel's jaw clenched. She's buying time. Elena scanned the tree line, movement flickered in her peripheral. Shadows, the faint glint of metal. Positions, she hissed. Gunfire erupted, loud, sharp, coordinated. They dove for cover, bullets tearing through bark and soil. Blake rolled behind a fallen log, returning fire. Daniel moved fast, flanking right. Elena's pulse slowed, the kind of focus that comes only when everything else disappears. Her rifle kicked against her shoulder, each shot precise. 2 men dropped. Another hit the dirt, crawling. Blake left flank, she shouted. On it. The forest filled with sound, metal, shouting, the distant hum of rotors closing in again. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. They're pushing us toward the open field. Elena's breath came hard. Then we give them what they want. She waited, counting the rhythm of the shots, the gaps in reloads, the flicker of shadows. Then she stood, fired a burst to draw attention, and sprinted toward the clearing. Marquez, Blake shouted, but she was already moving. Bullets cut the air around her, but she didn't stop. She slid behind a concrete barrier, catching her breath. Daniel followed seconds later, landing beside her. You're still insane, he said, reloading. She smirked. Told you not to forget that. Blake's voice came through the comm. I've got eyes on the tower. There's a signal booster on the top platform. You can transmit from there. Elena checked the drive in her pocket, still intact. Then we hold until you reach us. Daniel nodded. Always knew you'd get me into trouble again. She gave him a sidelong look. Still here, aren't you? He smiled faintly. Always. They moved together, covering each other's advance, clearing ground inch by inch. The tower loomed closer, its metal frame gleaming faintly under the sun. When they finally reached the base, Elena glanced up. The ladder stretched high, endless. I'll climb, she said. Daniel frowned. You can't, you're bleeding. I've climbed worse. He hesitated, then handed her a data cable from his pack. Plug this into the main transmitter. Once the file starts uploading, it can't be stopped. She nodded, gripping the ladder. Cover me. As she began to climb, her muscles burned, her hands slick with sweat and blood. Below, gunfire crackled, Daniel and Blake returning every shot. Halfway up, she paused, the wind cold against her face, the world spinning far beneath. She could see the valley stretching wide, the forest alive with movement, and above it all the black drones circling like vultures. She climbed faster. At the top, she pulled herself onto the platform. The wind howled. The transmitter box sat open, wires tangled, blinking lights weak but alive. She inserted the drive, connected the cable, and powered it up. A soft hum began, data streaming, encrypted files unraveling into the open world. Down below, Daniel shouted, "Marquez, you did it." She leaned over the railing, breathless. "It's Liv, keep them off me." But then she saw it, movement at the edge of the tree line. A figure in tactical black, rifle raised. The shot came fast. Elena ducked, the bullet whizzed past, grazing her arm. She fired back, steady and deliberate. Then the transmitter beeped. A green light flashed. Upload complete. She exhaled, closing her eyes. Relief flooded her. Below, Daniel grinned up at her. "You just told the whole world, Elena." Blake's voice crackled through the calm. "They'll know every lie, every name, you did it." But even as they spoke, Elena felt the tremor beneath her feet, subtle at first, then sharper. Explosives. The base of the tower erupted, fire and dust surging upward. Daniel looked up, eyes wide. Elena. The world tilted, metal groaning, structure collapsing. She grabbed the railing, holding on as the platform dropped beneath her. The sky spun, the ground rushing up. Daniel ran toward the base, shouting her name. And for one fleeting moment, through the chaos and smoke, she thought, maybe this is what freedom feels like. Not silence, not survival, just truth finally too loud to bury. Then everything went white, silence. Real silence, not the kind that hums beneath chaos, but the kind that follows after everything breaks. Elena's world was a blur of light and weightlessness. The sound was gone, the air was gone. There was only white, endless, soundless white. Then a heartbeat. Hers. Slow, stubborn. She opened her eyes. Smoke, ash, shattered steel. The calm tower was half collapsed, leaning like a broken skeleton against the gray sky. Fire licked through the wreckage below. The wind carried the smell of burnt metal and gunpowder. Elena lay halfway down the slope, body tangled in cables and dust. She tried to move, pain shot through her ribs like lightning. Her arm was cut, her head bleeding, but she was alive. Barely. For a long moment she didn't move, just breathed. Each inhale was proof she still could. Then a voice cut through the ringing in her ears, faint but real. "Elena, can you hear me?" "Daniel." She turned her head. Through the haze she saw him running toward her, bloodied, limping, his face streaked with dirt. Behind him, Blake followed, dragging his leg, still gripping his rifle. When they reached her, Daniel dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he brushed the debris from her face. Hey, stay with me." She tried to speak, but her throat was raw. Only a whisper came out. "It's done." Daniel blinked. "What?" She managed a weak smile. "The upload, it went through." Blake checked the ruined transmitter nearby, its screen cracked but glowing faintly. Streams of code still flickered across it, endless, unstoppable. He exhaled a disbelieving laugh. "She's right, data transfer complete. The files are live." Daniel looked back at her, a mix of pride and fear. "You did it." Elena's chest rose and fell slowly. "No," she whispered, "we did." The world beyond the valley was already stirring. Sirens wailed in the distance, military, local, unknown. Helicopters thundered far off, circling like vultures. Blake squinted up at the ridge. They'll be here in minutes. Kane won't stop until we're dead. Daniel's eyes hardened. Then we disappear before she gets the chance. He lifted Elena carefully, her weight light against his shoulder. She winced but didn't fight it. "Put me down," she muttered. "Not happening," he said. "Daniel." "You carried me once," he said quietly. "My turn." She didn't argue. They moved through the forest again, slower this time, following the stream downward until the smoke faded behind them. Every sound echoed too loud, every shadow felt too sharp. Blake walked behind, hand pressed against his bleeding side. "You think the upload reached anyone who matters?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He just kept walking, eyes on the horizon. Elena spoke instead, her voice faint but steady. "Truth doesn't wait for permission. Once it's out there, it finds someone who will listen." Blake gave a dry laugh. "Let's hope someone listens before we bleed out." By the time the sun began to sink, they found an old ranger cabin, abandoned, half collapsed but shelter. Inside, dust and decay filled the air. Cobwebs draped the corners, but there was a cot, a water barrel, and walls thick enough to muffle the sound of approaching engines. Daniel laid her down gently. Blake started a fire from splintered wood and torn fabric. The flames flickered weakly, but warmth crept into the space. Elena stared into the fire, her voice distant. "You think they'll twist it?" Daniel sat beside her, silent. "You know they will," she continued. "They'll call it fabricated, say we doctored it, that I'm unstable, vindictive." Blake snorted. "Yeah, they'll try, but once the names start dropping, the press won't sleep for a month." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It's not over yet. The upload was phase 1. Now it's about survival." He turned to her. "Do you still have that contact, the one at the post?" She nodded weakly. "Morgan Reeves, investigative desk. He trusted me once." "Then he'll trust you again," Daniel said, "if we get him the drive backup." Blake frowned. "You kept a backup." Elena managed a ghost of a smile. "Always." She reached under her vest and pulled out a second small data key, sealed in waterproof casing. "Rule 1, trust no signal. Rule 2, trust redundancy." Daniel shook his head, almost amused. "Still the smartest soldier I ever knew." "Flattery doesn't stop bleeding," she murmured. He tore a strip from his sleeve and retied the bandage around her arm. His hands were rough, careful. "I missed this," he said softly. Her eyes met his, tired but warm. "Getting shot at." He smiled. "No, you telling me what to do." For a while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Outside, the forest whispered, a wind moving through leaves, distant thunder rolling across the ridge. Then Blake's radio hissed faintly. He froze, signal spike. Daniel's head lifted. "Kane." Blake adjusted the dial, listening. The voice that came through was panicked, male, young, unfamiliar. "Repeat, this is Echo Command. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage the fugitives. Orders have changed." Daniel frowned. "What?" Another voice followed, clearer this time. "This is Joint Task Oversight. Directive Alpha 9 initiated. All units stand down. Targets are no longer classified hostile." Blake blinked. "Did we just win?" Elena's eyes narrowed. "No, we rattled them. That's different." Daniel stood, packing. If Command's stepping in, Kane's lost control of the narrative. But that means she's desperate. Blake rubbed his temple. "Desperate people make mistakes. We use that." Elena pushed herself upright, wincing. "No, we expose her completely. This doesn't end with her resignation or a trial. It ends with every name she buried dragged into the light." Daniel looked at her, the firelight catching the steel in her eyes. "You think you can face that again, after everything they took from you?" She didn't hesitate. "They took my silence, not my spine." He smiled faintly. "Then let's finish this." By morning, the world had changed. News alerts pinged across screens everywhere. military contractors under investigation, Senate inquiries, frozen accounts, whistleblower reports surfacing. Blake found an old radio in the cabin and tuned in. Static gave way to voices, hurried anchors, breaking news tones. In a shocking turn, evidence linked to the classified Operation Echo has been leaked online. Documents appear to implicate several high-ranking defense officials, including. He turned up the volume. Elena sat still, staring at the fire. The names rolled one by one: generals, senators, corporations. Then came the final line. And sources suggest that the leak originated from a former Navy captain declared deceased 5 years ago, Elena Marquez. Silence filled the cabin. Blake looked up. "You're a ghost story again." She smiled faintly. "Good, ghosts don't get subpoenaed." Daniel chuckled quietly, but there was pride there, deep, quiet pride. Blake leaned back, exhausted. The world's going to burn for a while. Elena stared out the window at the dawn light breaking through the trees. "Let it. Maybe something honest will rise from the ashes." Daniel watched her for a moment, then asked softly, "What happens to us now?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "We disappear. We let the truth breathe before we do." He nodded slowly, "And after that?" Elena's gaze softened. "After that, maybe we live like we were supposed to. Not soldiers, not ghosts, just people." For a long while none of them spoke. The fire burned low, the day grew brighter. Then Blake's radio cracked again, but this time the voice wasn't from command. It was civilian, calm. "This is WNN News. We've received confirmation that Senator Victoria Kane has been taken into federal custody following an attempted border escape. Leaked evidence suggests she authorized the unauthorized strike that led to over a dozen covert casualties. More updates to follow." Daniel's hand froze midair. "She's in custody." Elena exhaled, long and slow. "Justice." Blake shook his head. "No such thing, just balance." Elena leaned back against the wall. The exhaustion hit her all at once, the kind that lives deep, behind every scar. Outside, the first rain began to fall, soft, steady, washing the blood from the earth. Daniel stood and walked to the doorway. "You ever think we'd see a day like this?" She smiled faintly. "Not in this lifetime." He looked back at her, eyes tired but alive. "Then maybe we owe ourselves another one." She tilted her head. "Another what?" "Lifetime," he said simply. "A quieter one." Her lips curved slightly. "You and quiet never mixed." He shrugged. "Maybe it's time to learn." For the first time her laugh came easy, quiet, unguarded. Blake stood, grabbing his pack. "We should move before the search grid resets." Elena nodded, rising carefully. The pain was still there, but lighter now, something she could carry. As they stepped out into the rain, Daniel looked back once at the cabin, the smoke, the distant mountains. Then he said softly, "You did it, Elena. You gave them the truth." She shook her head. "No, I just reminded them it still exists." The rain fell harder, soaking the earth, erasing the footprints they left behind. And somewhere far above, satellites streamed fragments of data across the world, each line of code a confession, each headline a reckoning. For the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't quite name. Not peace, not relief, something quieter. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe freedom. Maybe both. How do you start over when the world only remembers the worst version of you? A week had passed since the tower fell. The leaks had gone global, every major outlet dissecting every file, every photograph, every lie. Kane's face was everywhere. So was Elena's. Disgraced war hero. Leaker. Ghost of Operation Echo. The headlines blurred into each other, but she didn't read them anymore. Not out of shame, out of peace. She had already lived through the worst judgment imaginable. The rest was just noise. Now she stood at the edge of an empty dock somewhere along the Chesapeake Bay, the air cool and gray. Her reflection rippled in the water, faint, fractured. The borrowed hoodie she wore hid the scars, but not the memory beneath them. Behind her, footsteps approached, quiet, measured. Daniel. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling through the morning mist. You'd think after all that, we'd earn a vacation somewhere warm. Elena smiled softly. Warm feels dishonest right now. He handed her a mug and sat beside her on the wooden planks, letting his legs dangle above the water. They confirmed Kane's conviction last night, he said. Treason, conspiracy, obstruction. Elena took a slow sip. How long? 25 years, minimum. She nodded, silent. Blake gone off-grid, Daniel added. Said he's heading west, wants to disappear before the politics catch up. Good for him, she said quietly. He deserves quiet. Daniel glanced at her. And you? She looked out at the horizon, where the first hint of sunrise painted the water in soft orange light, still figuring that part out. He leaned back on his palms. You could go back, clear your name officially, take the offers. They're already calling you a hero again. Elena laughed softly, a hollow sound. They called me that before. It didn't mean much then either. He tilted his head. So what does? She didn't answer right away. She just watched the waves move, small, unbothered, eternal. Then she said, being believed, once, by someone who didn't have to. Daniel studied her face, calm but not unscarred. You know, most people wouldn't have survived what you did, physically or otherwise. Elena looked at him, eyes steady. Most people don't get a second chance to mean something. He smiled faintly. You always meant something, you just forgot. The words settled between them like truth, finally given shape. They sat there for a long while, the wind cold, the silence full. Then Daniel said quietly, you ever think about that day, the wedding? Elena's expression softened. Every time I close my eyes. Do you regret it? She thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, I think he did me a favor. Daniel raised an eyebrow, getting left at the altar. She smiled faintly. No, making me realize I didn't need saving, I needed purpose. He nodded slowly. Guess you found it. Her eyes glinted in the dawn light. Or it found me. He studied her for a moment, then looked out at the horizon. So what now? You stay here, go back to the Navy. She took another sip, then placed the mug down carefully. No uniforms, no ranks, no more silence. Maybe I just teach. Help the ones who come after us see through the lies before they lose themselves to them. Daniel smiled, small, proud. You'd be good at that. Maybe, she said softly, if they listen. He turned toward her, expression serious now. They will, because you don't just teach tactics, Elena, you teach truth. For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked up at him and whispered, You're not staying, are you? Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. No, not for long. Too many ghosts chasing me. I need to make peace with a few of them before I end up one. She nodded slowly. I figured. He looked away, exhaling. You always did. Silence again. The wind picked up, rustling the water's surface. Finally she asked, Where will you go? South first, then maybe nowhere. She smiled faintly. Nowhere sounds nice. He laughed softly. You could come. Elena shook her head. You go find your quiet, I'll find mine. Daniel looked at her, the lines of her face, the quiet strength there, the steadiness that no war or betrayal could erase. You're still the bravest person I know. She gave him a look, part disbelief, part gratitude. You only think that because you were too close to see the cracks. He smiled. Cracks don't make you weak, they let the light in. Her eyes softened. That's not your line. I borrowed it. They both laughed quietly. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the bay. Daniel stood slowly, pulling his jacket tighter. If anyone asks, you never saw me. She looked up at him, a ghost of a smile on her lips. That's easy. I've spent years pretending you were dead." He grinned, "Then pretend one more time." He started to walk away, slow, steady, without turning back. But just before the path curved out of sight, he stopped. "Elena," he called. She turned slightly, hands shielding her eyes from the sun. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "don't let them make you small again." She didn't answer, just nodded once. And then he was gone. The world went still again, only the water moving, the sky stretching wide. Elena stayed there long after he disappeared, watching the tide. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the second data key, the original drive, and turned it in her hand. All it held now was copies of what the world already knew, but to her, it was more than evidence. It was proof she hadn't imagined it all, proof that silence can end if you're brave enough to break it. She placed it gently on the dock, then flicked it into the water. It sank slowly, ripples spreading outward until they vanished. No records, no ghost, just peace. As the waves settled, she whispered, not to anyone, not even to herself, just to the wind. "They tried to bury me, but they forgot I was the soil." The words lingered in the air, soft, defiant, final. She stood, pulling her hood over her head, and began walking down the dock, each step lighter than the one before. The sun warmed her face. The wind carried away the last traces of smoke and memory. By the time she reached the end of the pier, she didn't look back. Somewhere behind her, the radio she'd left on the bench crackled faintly, a breaking news broadcast echoing through the quiet morning. Former Navy Captain Elena Marquez is being hailed today as both a whistleblower and a symbol of moral courage, as the nation confronts the largest intelligence scandal in modern history. A senior Pentagon source described her actions as, quote, "a reminder that integrity isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to bow to it." The radio faded as she walked away, her figure shrinking against the golden horizon. And in that moment, it wasn't about war or politics or redemption. It was about something smaller and infinitely more powerful. The quiet choice to do what's right. The courage to stand when no one claps. The grace to walk away without needing to be remembered. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.